All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. So, after 4 years as the general manager of the Dallas Mavericks, Nico Harrison was let go today. And even though that the highlight of Harrison's time with the Mavericks will be when the team won the Western Conference Championship in 2024, it's not going to be what he is remembered for. Now, it's just been a little bit over 9 months, okay, since one of the most alarming trades in professional sports history went down when Harrison and the Mavericks decided to trade superstar Luka Doncic to the Los Angeles Lakers. And upon trading Luka to the Lakers, Harrison, nor the Mavericks organization for that matter, was ready for the public relations nightmare that has come with it because it's still going on. Okay. Fans in Dallas immediately wanted the Mavericks to fire Harrison. While we've even seen some fans give up their season tickets. You think about it, the tailspin last year towards the end of the season for the Mavericks, and it looked like there was a glimmer of hope. Okay, I'm still holding out hope long term. Okay, but it looked like there was some glimmer of hope when Dallas, stumbled upon the first overall pick in this past June's NBA draft, which of course they used on Phenom Cooper Flag. However, the addition of Flag has not yielded immediate positive results for the Mavericks. Why? Because they're 3-8 to start this season. Last night, we saw Dallas blow a double-digit lead at home to the Milwaukee Bucks, and they lost the game. And of course, the Fire Nico chants continued. It's one of those where clearly the Mavericks have not gotten off to a strong start this year. Like I said, they're 3-8. They've lost 5 out of the last 6. And you figure that, along with the chance, along with the fact that people are not showing up to Mavericks games like they were in the past, you know what? Mavericks majority owner Patrick Dumont had no choice uh, but to move on from Nico Harrison here. But it's one of those where if you're Patrick Dumont and this ownership group, you could fire Nico Harrison 10 times and it won't undo what has been done. Plain and simple, you can't put the toothpaste back into the tube, okay? And there is no coming back for the Dallas Mavericks from this trade. Now, you go back and remember when all of this stuff went down, Harrison convinced Mavericks ownership that they needed to trade Luka. And then, of course, the Mavericks ownership, for as far as I'm concerned, allowed themselves to be convinced that the franchise could go on sans Luka. Now you go back to this, and of course, questions about Luka's attitude, questions about his conditioning and his commitment led to this trade. But I feel that with a strong ownership group in place, it would have never allowed to have gotten to this point. And of course, some people say, I know Mark Cuban is still a minority owner with this team, excuse me. But he's not around like he once was before. And a lot of people feel, hey, if Mark Cuban was still calling the shots, this trade would have never gone down. But nonetheless, naive Nico would go on to say that he was surprised by the public outcry following the Luka trade. I mean, what did he really expect? I mean, does this guy have his head in the sand or something? Because it's one of those where Luka is a bona fide superstar. And I don't use the term superstar that much. I feel like there are a lot of stars out there, yes. And I feel like the word or term superstar is overused. But in the case of Luka Doncic, he is a superstar. And, it's one of those you have to sit back and you ask yourself, what in the world happened? Because, A, just 9 months ago, this trade went down, okay? And then just in June of 2024, the Mavericks were in the NBA Finals. what in the world happened to this franchise. But nonetheless, you look at Dallas right now. They have Cooper Flag. Cooper Flag is a phenom. The future is bright for him. But at this point of his career, he is not Luka Doncic. And honestly, I'll tell you like this. Cooper Flag has tremendous potential to be very successful in the NBA, but not to any of his own doing. Unfortunately, this young man is always going to be attached at the hip due to this trade and the way that things went down. Okay, you go back to the Luka trade to the Lakers. Of course, they got the oft injured Anthony Davis back, and of course, like clockwork, AD had a couple of good games for Dallas last season, got hurt, and of course, AD is hurt once again. Okay, you've got a situation where Kyrie Irving, who appeared to be the perfect sidekick to Luca. Of course, they put this team on their backs respectively to get to the finals back in 2024. Kyrie suffered that ACL injury. He's still recovering, and of course, he has not played this season. You've got a veteran Klay Thompson coming off the bench. He's not the player that he once was with the Golden State Warriors, and I think he was a perfect complement to Kyrie and Luka, and we really never got to see them play that much together last season due to the injuries for both Kyrie and Luka at the time. But you put it all together, and no Kyrie, no AD. Clay is a shell of himself, and you have a team that is relying on a rookie, okay, to put them over the top. Cooper Flag is not Luka Doncic, and I think people have to understand that. And I think the best thing that the Mavericks can do is allow Cooper Flag to be Cooper Flag. But easier said than done because, like I said before, he is going to be attached at the hip due to the incompetence of the people that are running the Dallas Mavericks. Now, Patrick Dumont just made Nico Harrison the sacrificial lamb for this organization's incompetence because Harrison, don't get me wrong, Nico Harrison didn't do himself or anybody else any favors. But again, a GM, a president of basketball operations, whomever, can come to ownership and say, hey, I want to go out there and make this move. Okay. Still, the owner has the opportunity to put his foot down and say no. Remember, there was once upon a time where Bill Belichick wanted to trade Tom Brady, and Robert Kraft put his foot down and said no. Okay. And the Patriots still went on and got themselves another Super Bowl championship after that. Somebody in that room had to put their foot down and say no. Problem is, we have new age owners, and these new age owners are not sports people. They're treating it like a business more than ever. They're hiring business people to run their respective front offices. Okay, yes, a sports franchise is a business, but it's not a typical business between the lines. You need sports people in these front offices. In the case of the Dallas Mavericks, you need basketball people. Okay, yes, Nico Harrison played basketball, once upon a time, but he spent the last 20 years previously to joining the Mavericks as an executive with Nike. Okay, you need basketball people to come in there and run your organization. You need some type of structure, you need a plan. And clearly, right now, with the way that the Dallas Mavericks are operating, they don't have a plan. Okay, so you go back to Nico Harrison, who just lost his job. Okay, and I'm not here to shed a tear for him, okay, because he did it to himself. But it's going to be, whether he gets another job in the NBA or not, wherever he goes for the rest of his life, he is always going to be remembered as a guy who traded Luka Doncic in his prime away to the Los Angeles Lakers. And this was a Lakers franchise who couldn't wait to jump on this deal. And aside from the controversy that we saw with Luka going to the Lakers, remember, Nico Harrison did not open up Luka Doncic to possibly be traded to anybody else. He was only in contact with the Lakers. And again, getting back to this inept organization that we are clearly seeing with the Dallas Mavericks, it's a shame because Mark Cuban, the Mavericks were his baby. They were, he really breathed sweat and, cried for this organization, and he did everything possible to make the Mavericks a champion, keep the Mavericks in championship contention, and really change the culture around this franchise. Because if you remember, if anybody remembers, the Dallas Mavericks were a laughing stock before Mark Cuban came in and changed things. And very quickly, Patrick Dumont and company are dismantling everything that Mark Cuban worked for. And it's a shame. And like I said before, this is what happens when you get business oriented people and not sports oriented people running things. And then they turn around and hire people who basically look good in suits, but they really don't know what they are doing. And on the flip side of this, Nico Harrison, the guy who couldn't get through to Luka, who gave up on Luka, is now out of a job. And we have seen Luka go to LA. The dragon has been unleashed. He's motivated. He wants to stick it to the Mavericks. And we, like a lot of people said at the time of the trade, a motivated Luka was going to be very scary for the rest of the NBA. And we are seeing that right now. And I think he is about to be off to the races with the Lakers. Not only because Luka is motivated, but the Lakers are a better run organization. Remember, that sale just went through. Jeannie Buss giving up the majority control to Mark Walter. And like I've said before, Mark Walter is a part of the Dodgers ownership group. And of course, we have seen the success that franchise has had in Major League Baseball for more than 10 years. And now you're giving him the opportunity to run the Lakers with one of the NBA's best players in his prime at his disposal for you to build around. You know what? Christmas came early for the Los Angeles Lakers. And it's one of those in sports. Whenever you let go or whenever you part with a great player, it's one of those where even if you have a backup plan, it's very difficult to execute that backup plan because let's just say, for the sake of argument, Anthony Davis is healthy. And as good as Anthony Davis is when he's healthy, he's not Luka. He doesn't captivate people like Luka. And Luka really captivated that fan base around this franchise in North Texas. So, when you part with a franchise player, it's something that, really is really difficult to go out there and replicate. And honestly, it's going to take the Mavericks a very long time for them to overcome this. I mean, you think about it, just using this as an example. Granted, things were a lot different. There's a different scenario. When Shaquille O'Neal left the Orlando Magic back in 1996, okay, it took them probably about 7 or 8 years before they got Dwight Howard as the first overall pick. And I know that Dwight was able to get the Magic to the finals like Shaq was. Had a good team around him when they went in 2009. But nonetheless, Dwight Howard was never Shaq. And he was never able to captivate people, and gravitate people in the same fashion that a Shaquille O'Neal did. So again, my point is when you allow prime superstar players to leave your organization, it is very difficult to recapture that. And it's going to be a very long time before I think the Mavericks are going to be talked about in the same breath. And I'm old enough to remember when the Mavericks were a joke in the NBA. Okay. And I'm not saying that the Mavericks are going to go back to being a joke, but we're not going to think of them in the same fashion that we have thought about them for the last 20 to 25 years. So, you know what? It was inevitable, okay? Because, again, Patrick Dumont and company allowed themselves to be convinced by Nico Harrison that they could move on from Luka Doncic. But again, the blowback from the fans, and I think the fact that the fans stopped showing up to home games, that is what really affects the owners. Because if you have a 15 or 16,000 seat arena, okay, I'm not sure of the capacity for American Airlines Center down there in Dallas or whatever they're calling it right now. But I'm just saying, let's say it's 16,000, and instead of getting a sold out arena each and every night for a home game, you're now getting between 10 to 12,000 people. Guess what? That's 4 or 5,000 people less that are buying concessions, paying for parking, buying merchandise, you name it. Okay. The owners feel that. Okay. And again, this is what you have to really think about when you sit down and make moves like this. I feel like the Luka trade was a rash decision. It was when somebody or multiple parties are frustrated about a decision. And whenever you are frustrated, whenever you have a rash decision, you don't think things through. Okay. I think the right ownership and the right people around you, okay, would have made that decision a little bit better. And again, if you had basketball people, real basketball people within this organization who had some cachet, who had, some type of say in things, I don't think this decision is made because I think you find a way to find a happy median with a guy like Luka Doncic. I was on the fence about the trade at first, but I'll tell you like this, big time mistake for the Dallas Mavericks. And at least for Luka's career, uh, his remaining career in the NBA, I don't see the Mavericks ever getting over this, at least during that time. I think, but coming back to Dallas for this season, it's still very early. They're 3-8. You don't have AD. Hopefully, you can get Kyrie back at some point this season, but it's not a guarantee that Kyrie is going to be Kyrie immediately as he comes back from that ACL injury. And again, they're putting a lot of stock on a rookie, a guy, like I said, in Cooper Flag, who has potential, but he can't do it by himself. And you have to wonder how he is going to hold up over a full 82 game regular season because, again, this young man is not accustomed to that. But nonetheless, it was inevitable that this was going to happen. The clock was ticking for Nico Harrison as soon as this trade went down. It's one of those where it's been 9.5 months, and Nico Harrison can be gone from Dallas for 9.5 years. People will never forget this. And I'll tell you like this, if Luca goes on to win a championship or two in the purple and gold, because I guarantee you the Lakers are not letting him out of their fold anytime soon. They're going to build around him. And if Luca goes on to win championships, this is going to be the Mavericks version of the curse of the Bambino. And of course, anybody who knows baseball knows what happens when the Red Sox sold Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees. And I'll just leave it there. And then one can make a case that the Lakers are basically the Yankees of the NBA. But nonetheless, Nico Harrison, the clock was ticking on him as soon as he went ahead and okayed that trade. That was one of those what in the world has happened moments. And like I said before, he nor the Dallas Mavericks will ever be able to recover from this. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And as always, if you like what you heard and saw on this podcast, you know what to do. Just hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. And like I always say, it's greatly appreciated. Also, if you are on the X, formerly known as Twitter, you can check me out anytime at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you give me that follow, I will do the same in return. And that also goes for Instagram, and you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. Also, if you're on Facebook, definitely check out the Sports Depot 365. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports groups going on social media. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I'm signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.